So today we are going to be talking about rounding. Now, when I talk about rounding in math, I'm thinking of a type of estimation where I'm thinking about what value is a number closest to. And there are rules for that when we are rounding. Depending on the circumstance, you will be asked to round to a particular place value. Now, that might be the tens place, it might be the hundreds place, the thousands place, and so on. And so all that means when you hear that is what multiple of that number is it closest to? So sometimes you hear that as your decades. So if I was asked to round to the nearest 10, I would be thinking about my multiples of 10, 10, 20, 30, and so on. Same thing goes for rounding it to the nearest 100, 100, 200, 300, 400, and so on. And again, that pattern keeps repeating no matter what place value you're being asked to round to. And we do this all the time in real life, whether I'm thinking about how much money I should bring to the store or on a trip. I'm not going to be exact because I don't know exactly how much everything will come to, if there's taxes or if there's change involved. So what we do then is we bring about how much we would need. In that case, we are rounding. So let's say you were given, let's start off with something smaller. Let's start with thinking about a number like 17. Okay? So if I was asked to round to the nearest 10, okay, I am thinking what two multiples of 10 is 17 between? Well, when I'm counting, 17 comes between 10 and 20. So I know that 17 is somewhere between these two multiples of 10. But where and which one is it closest to? So for this, we always now want to think about a halfway point. And when we are talking about decades and tens, we know that half of 10 is 5. So half of 100 would be 50, half of 1,000 is 500. And that pattern again keeps coming back. So we really are going to think of that 5 as our halfway point when we are rounding. So I'm going to put in my halfway point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So my halfway point would be here. So I'm going to put my halfway between 10 and 20 then would be 15. Okay. And so you've probably heard the rule before where they say if it's 4 or less, you round down. If it's 5 or more, you round up. And that is a very helpful rule, but it's also important to know why we're rounding up when it's 5 or more, or less when it is down if it's 4 or less. So this visual of the number line and that idea of our halfway point is where that rule came from. So when I think about 17, we know that 7 is more than 5. So with that rule, we know we would be rounding up. But here is why. So when we're counting on our number line, I've got my 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and then 20. Okay, 17 is 2 more than 15. So 17 would go right about here. Okay, and now as you can see, when I'm looking at that number line, is it closer to being to the 10 or is it closer to being at the 20? And you can see that I'm only 1, 2, 3 away from 20, whereas I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 away from 10, which means I am a lot closer to reaching 20 than I am going back to 10. And so you can see once you've passed that 5, where that rule comes from, now you are closer to the other side. So when you think about that halfway point, if I'm anything less than the 5, I'm obviously closer to this half, which would mean I round down. If I am larger, or past that halfway point, I am now closer to reaching the next number. So let's try that now with a larger number. Let's say I wanted to take the number 324. Okay. And let's say I'm again being asked to round to the nearest 10. Okay, there's my tens place. Okay. So now I'm going to ask myself again, when I'm thinking about multiples of 10, what two multiples of 10 does the number fall between? So for this moment, I'm going to disregard the larger values because I'm not rounding to that place. So I'm looking at numbers smaller than it, so I'm going to focus on the numbers that come before the 3 in the 300, which is the 2 in the tens place and a 4 in the ones place, which is a 24. Okay, so we're thinking about, we've decomposed it now into a 300 and a 24, so that expanded form. But since I'm rounding to the nearest 10, I'm looking at the 24. So what two multiples of 10 is 24 between? When I'm counting, right, I know that 24 comes between 20 and 30. And again, we're going to our halfway point, which is a 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so between 20 and 30 would be 25. So now I have to place 24 on my number line. So I see 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 goes right here. So if you remember, we said if it comes before that halfway point, so less than 5, okay, we're going to round down. And you can see visually that the 24 is closer to this side than it is over here. Okay, there's a larger space. So I know I would be rounding 24 down to 20. Now, what about that 300 that was in the number? Well, it's still there, so I still have that. I've turned 24 now into 20, and I still have my 300. So 300 and a 20, now that I've turned it into from rounding, becomes 320, which would be my answer. 324 rounded to the nearest 10 would be 320. Now, what if we're given an even larger number? Let's see if the rules still apply. So this time, I'm going to go up to the 10,000s place. So I'm going to take, let's say, 32,563. And I want to round to the nearest 1,000. I'm going to underline or mark my thousands place. That's a really great way to make sure I'm paying attention. And I might even separate it from the digits in front of it so that I'm really thinking about this number right here. Now, the 30,000 stays there. Okay, remember we talked about expanded form? If I broke or decomposed this number apart, I would have 30,000. Okay, and then I'm going to keep this next number together. Okay, so I'm just going to 2,563. So it's not a full-on expanded form, but I'm pulling out the numbers in front the values there, and then I'm leaving this one because since I am running to the thousands, this is what I'm looking at. And then we'll come back in to that 30,000 when we're done. So 2,563. Since I'm rounding to the thousands, I'm now thinking about multiples of 1,000. 3,000, and so on. So which two thousands would 2,563 be between? Well, I know that I've already made it to 2,000, so 1,000 is not an option. Okay, well, 2,563 is more than 2,000, and I still hear the 2,000 in it, so I know that that's going to be my starting point. Okay. And then over here, I know that I'm not at 4,000. There's 3,000 comes before that, so I don't need that one. So between 2,000 and 3,000 is the number that we will be rounding to today. And then, of course, we need to put in our halfway point, which we know it has a 5. So in this case, we are 2,500 because 500 is half of 1,000. Okay? So now we need to figure out where 2,563 would go. Well, I see the 2,500 here, and 63 more than that would put me on this side of the number line. So 2,500, 2,600 would be here. 2,700, 2,800, 2,900. So 2,563 is between 2,600 and 500. So I'm going 63. We're going to put it right about here. Okay. So that's 2,563. Okay. Now we can see, are we closer to being at the 2,000 side of the number line or the 3,000? Yeah, we've passed that halfway point. So once we pass that, or that 5 or up rule, right? That's where this is coming from. These numbers are all going to be bigger than that halfway point. So I would round this to 3,000. Sorry, 3,000, since it's closer to this half. Okay, so now I am rounding that up, so it becomes 3,000. And then I put it back together with that 30,000 that we started with, which brings me to 33,000 is what we rounded the number to the nearest thousand.